Welcome to this new episode of our series about harmonic innovation books. Today we have a super guest, the author of a really important book. She is Helga Novotny. She is a social scientist of science and technology, and she dedicated quite a long time to studying time and other things. And in this book, which is called Le macchine di Dio in Italian, um, she talks about this artificial intelligence that we think can predict uh, quite an important amount of the future, and what happens then, what are the consequences of developing this kind of machines. Of course, I should mention that she has also served as president of the ERC, one of the European institutions that are more trusted and important in Europe for funding science, and she did quite a lot of things to help development of science in many ways. Um, Helga Novotny, what is the main point, the main message in your book?
Let me take one step back before explaining it, because there is so much literature on the book market about artificial intelligence, about digitalization, and I found much of the literature of two different kinds. One kind is the techno-optimistic version. Every problem will be solved if we deploy artificial intelligence. And the other version is the dystopian, the pessimistic version, that describes how things will go bad. We will lose most of our jobs. The machines will become more intelligent than us, and there are even speculations that it might become the end of humanity. So I was trying to find my way between this over optimistic and over pessimistic version. And since, as you rightly said, I have been working on time for many, many years, it's a fascinating topic. And then I thought there is one specific characteristic of artificial intelligence that has an enormous impact on us and the way how we see our future, namely the predictive algorithm. And we use artificial intelligence in many ways in our most banal everyday life. If you want to know which book you will buy next time, the algorithm tells you which options. So there is a prediction which book you will buy, or other consumption, or which vacation you should consider to go to. So all this is prediction in our daily life. But then there are predictions that are connected to the way how institutions work. For instance, in the United States, the police is using predictive algorithm, and also the judiciary system. And they use predictive algorithm, for instance, will a person be granted bail? This means not having to go to prison, but you pay and you are spared from prison, at least for a time. Or it can influence also the sentence, because the algorithm predicts that this particular person is more likely than other persons to become criminal again. And then there is the normal business, where also predictive algorithms are used for decision making. And I could go on. There are also other applications, weather forecasts, climate forecasts, all of them use predictive algorithms. But the impact it has on us as human beings connected to our own future is what I found very interesting. Because if we trust what the algorithm tells us will happen, and if we believe that it knows the future, we are likely to follow the predictions. And then we are in a situation that has been described as self-fulfilling prophecies. In other words, these are predictions that will become true because people believe they are true and they act accordingly. And I find this problematic for a number of reasons, but foremost, it narrows the way how we look at the future. It constrains the horizon of the future, that is an open horizon. And in the book, I also mention how long it has taken for humanity to overcome the belief that our fate as individuals has been predetermined. It has been set by some higher powers, by the gods or by God, or whatever, so that we have a fate in which has been determined for us. And it was only in the age of enlightenment that we started to see, and there's a German historian by the name of Koselleck, who has worked on this in particular. And he showed how between 740 and 1840 approximately, a gap started to arise between the experience of people and their aspirations. And people discovered we don't necessarily have to live the same life like our parents. So this is the experience. My life will be like that of my parents. I will have the same kind of occupation as my father. My social standing will be the same as that of my parents, etc. And they started to have aspirations. It could be different. And this gap that opened between experience and aspirations led to see people for the first time that the future is an open horizon. Things can be different. And this was very important, a message from the Enlightenment that has been taken up in many different ways. But it also allowed people to get more confidence. They can do something about their presumed fate. They can change things. And this later became, of course, part of the assumptions on which modernity rested, that we can shape things. Sometimes we were overconfident what we could do, but nevertheless, this is important.
Yes, this is, and in a way, this relates to the things that you said at the beginning, the optimism and pessimism about machines. In a way, it leads me to say that the self-fulfilling prophecy that happens when we believe in machines and predictions coming from machine is linked to an idea of progress, because the machine is better than what we had in the past, because there is this narrative of progress, or meta narrative, as you say. It's an interpretation frame in which we say there is something that is going better. And in a way, the pessimism is not believing in this narrative, is looking at what is wrong in this. Where are we? I mean, enlightenment is linked to this idea of progress and optimism.
Yes.
We are facing quite a lot of problems with this.
Yeah, you are right in pointing out that this narrative of progress, in my view, is becoming weaker and weaker, and we have many signs for this. If you ask anyone belonging to the middle classes in Western industrialized countries, most people will tell you they don't believe that their children will be better off than they are. And we have also specific data for the American, even for the working class, where they say when I was 30, I earned more than my son or my daughter is likely to earn today. So there is a kind of deterioration of the living conditions of the middle classes happening in the West. It's very different in Asia. In Asia, the middle classes are rising. If you take a country like India, which is a continent, you had a small elite and you had a huge amount of people who were very, very poor. And the same happened in China. So these poor have been lifted, and a substantial part of it became middle class. But for us in the West, we see this decline in the belief in progress. Progress was seen as something that is linear. Things will become better and better and better. And of course, looking back, things have improved. There is no way of denying it. And in many ways, our health conditions, longevity is the most visible indicator, of course, how old we can become today compared to previous generations, but also the way how we live and our sense of enjoying life. And everything will become better and better. And we all have the feeling now, no, it will not become better. It might become better in some ways, but this overall belief in the narrative of progress, I think, is coming to an end. And of course, the question is, what can replace it? Or do we have to start even to rethink the Enlightenment? And this opens a number of questions. And I think what we are facing is a much more complex world than what modernity made us believe. There is linear progress. Things will become better than they are today. And today, in fact, we see so many crises around us. The sustainability crisis, climate change. We now have the war in Ukraine. We have a interruption of supply chains. Africa, many countries may go without food because the grain can no longer leave the Ukraine. We have inflation and so on. So all this is coming together in a very complex way, and makes it very, very difficult to believe progress will overcome everything. And progress, of course, was linked very much to technology, because the way how people experienced progress was we had machines, they were more efficient, they allowed for productivity to go up. So we had economic growth based essentially on the technological progress and the way how it was inserted into the economy, of course. And now you are probably familiar with the discussion that is ongoing. Why does productivity, since we have digitalization, already many firms are using automation. They change their system to become digital. So why does productivity not go up the way how it did before in history? And it's an open question. We know it's not going up the same way. Some people say, well, we measure things in a wrong way. We don't really look at the financial services, for instance, the way how digital services make our life easier, etc. Others say, no, we have overcome some kind of peak. So, we face a different situation than during modernity, when people were really convinced with more technology, everyone will be better off.
And given complexity, you write about the fact that there is this new relationship with technology, which is coevolution. Coevolution as in the ecosystem, in a way. So the new progress, as you said, the fascinating question, what will replace progress? I would like very much to hear about that, but you gave us a small part of an answer while talking about the fact that in the past progress was a technological progress. Now we have a co-evolution of society, cultural, and technology and economics. So also this kind of progress is not anymore linear, but it's going to be complex in any case. So what will replace progress?
Well, if we take the term co-evolution and try to deconstruct it, what does it actually mean? First of all, evolution, biological evolution, has no end goal. There is no telos, to use the the term. There is no goal in it. Evolution continues by trial and error. It brings forth new forms of life, new forms of existence. In biology, we have biodiversity. We know that some branches went extinct. So extinction is also part of evolution, and it continues, but we cannot say there is an end goal. And co-evolution, we have goals as human beings. We set ourselves goals. Partly we want to have, there may be material goals, but in general, we also have other kinds of goals. We want to be better human beings. Whatever be it religious, ethical consideration, or just, saying this is part of our humanity, that we want to improve ourselves, but also we want to improve how we live together, which means we want better societies that are perhaps more harmonious. With less conflicts than we have today. So the co-evolution means that this blind evolution without a goal that continues, and our setting of goals are coming together. But nobody knows what the outcome will be. And in co-evolution, you have different strands coming and mixing and mingling. And it's an open-ended process, which means also there is uncertainty. And I argue very strongly that we should not be afraid of uncertainty. Quite to the contrary, we have to live with uncertainty, but we should also try to find that uncertainty creates new possibilities. It opens up new spaces. Because when you are faced with uncertainty, you cannot go on as you did before, and because the certainty is lacking that you will succeed in doing what you set out to do. So you have to stretch your imagination. You have to find new ways, and uncertainty, I also call it the cunning of uncertainty. Sometimes shows you new pathways that you would not have considered before. So there is this idea of openness, moving towards an uncertain future, and the future is and remains uncertain. But at the same time, we know that by having our goals, we are not completely lost. On the other hand, we recognize that the evolutionary force, and as human beings, we are part of the biological evolution. We are born, we die. We are part of these biological evolutionary processes. But at the same time, we have a cultural evolution. And the cultural evolution comes in through science and everything that science stands for, discovering new knowledge, moving into the space. Also the knowledge space that is immense. And if you think of studying the brain, for instance, there are so many questions we don't know as yet. So this is the cultural part of it. And this is why I find co-evolution fascinating. And where it will end up, nobody can tell you.
Yeah, Yeah, I can. I give this last words to our listeners and viewers, and I'm sure they will convene with that. But this is already a way to put the question in a realistic and understandable way. It's a coevolution. There are goals. There are uncertainty. There are possibilities that open, and that's clearly very different from the linear idea of the son that will be better off than the
Yeah,
parents.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah. That's clear. But you mentioned by en passant the idea of harmonious, so I need to pick on that. And in your book, you also use words that could be linked to that, like happiness in a way, and the wisdom that we need to look at the future. Is that are those concepts linked in a way?
Well, the happiness, I use it because it was a very important concept in the 18th century, at the beginning of the Enlightenment. All the Enlightenment thinkers were speaking about public happiness. Public
Yeah.
happiness. The society should be happy. Now, what it meant very often was something very banal but essential, namely that people should have enough to eat. And happy people would be well fed people. This was the basic condition for becoming happy and having public happiness. Now, today, nobody speaks about public happiness. Perhaps, there's this tiny little country in the Himalaya hills, Bhutan. They have a happiness index, and you find surveys about happiness. But mostly, when we speak about happiness, we think of individual happiness, but not about public happiness. And so I'm not arguing that we can go back to this idea of the Enlightenment, what is public happiness. But I think we have certainly overdone it with becoming more and more individualistic in discussing these important questions and thinking only about ourselves as individuals and neglecting the other part. How do individuals live together? How do you create something like solidarity? And the harmonious part for me would come in by thinking, what can we do in order to reduce conflict? And we see also how social media have been really reinforcing the kind of hate exists. But the reinforcement of hate, the public utterance of hate, that of course engenders. It's like violence. Violence engenders violence, and hate engenders hate. And how can you break this? And I think turning away from seeing the world only in individualistic terms, and trying to think, what is the social fabric which is needed for any individual really to flourish, because no person, man or woman, is an island.
And this is linked to the concept of wisdom that we need about looking at the future. It's not, of course, wisdom. What is it? Wisdom is a synthetic idea of the whole. What is?
Yeah, well, wisdom is not only, old people who have a lot of experience who are wise. It's good to have them around, but it's not enough. And wisdom is another way of looking at the world by thinking in more holistic terms, seeing connections where before you don't see connections. And we always need critical judgment, but I would say when I speak about future needs wisdom, we also need institutions that have at least, a sense. We don't only have to follow the rules or neglect the rules, but we should have something like wisdom in doing so. And the way how we approach other people and judge other people, from a point of view of wisdom, we see also parts that normally we don't see or don't consider. So it's an ethos. I call it a different way of approaching. It will not solve all problems, but we could need a stronger dose of it in our interactions, but also for ourselves and for society.
Helga Novotny, Le Macchine di Dio, thank you very much for being with us. You helped our research about thinking about harmony and mnemonic innovation very much. It's the link between this new kind of machines, the new kind of progress, co-evolution, goals, and the dimension of the institutional, collective, social relationship between people that overcomes the 40 years of boom of individualism is going to be very important for the research of harmonic innovation and all those that are passionate with that. Thank you very much, Helga Novotny. I hope to have you again here at this series about books.
Thank you. Thank you. It was a real pleasure talking to you. Thank you.
Thank you.